Hi everybody, thanks for tuning into the channel. I want to talk a little bit tonight about basically how music fits into your life. Everybody's life consists of a lot of different facets, and music's just one of those facets. And you've got, your values, your morals. Maybe you have a professional obligation. Maybe you have an education background. Maybe you have a religious background. So there's different aspects to your life, and it can and maybe you got a certain kind of family background. Maybe you're single, married, you got kids. There's a lot of different factors, and music kind of fits in there in different ways. And I just wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the conflicts that can arise, and some of the things that you can you know that can happen when you're trying to make either a living in music or just have your presence known, and how that can impact things. I'll go back to like 1995 when I put out my first album. It was an instrumental guitar album called Orion Ascending. And the title cut of the song is this big, kind of it's acoustic guitar, electric guitar. There's all kinds of kind of ambient things going on in it. It's a big sounding, almost orchestral guitar piece with about 19 guitar tracks. It's just huge sounding. And I had this album, as any instrumental album, it's mainly going to get played on public radio. And I had sent out copies of the CD back then to radio stations all over the country, and some of them were playing it. And I was contacting the program directors of the various stations to thank them for playing it, or maybe didn't just kind of bring it to their attention. And I called up this one station. I forgot what state it was in. And the receptionist answers the phone. I'm waiting kind of for the program director to be available, and so I'm just sitting there talking to the receptionist for a little bit. And I asked her, I said, "Have you heard the album Orion Ascending?" Because I knew this station had been playing it quite a bit. And she didn't realize that it was that I was the composer and performer of the piece. And she goes, "Oh yes, I heard it's a wonderful album." And I said, "I'm thinking, okay, oh good, this is a good sign." And she says, "Do you know what that means?" I said, "What?" Now I was like, well, what does what mean? And she goes, "The name Orion Ascending." And I said, "No, tell me." And she kind of lowers her voice, and she goes, "Yeah, it's just because Orion is as close now to the earth as it's ever going to be again in our lifetime." And she goes, "And that's important to those of us who believe." I don't know what the lady believed. it's I'm not familiar with the belief system that has anything to do with Orion, but maybe there's one out there. And I thought, well, isn't that kind of odd? She's just associated that title with something that's meaningful to her, but I mean, really, the title for me came from living in Alaska, and the constellation Orion is much more prominent in the northern latitudes of the northern hemisphere. And our house in Alaska, about 40 miles from Anchorage, the trees around the house kind of framed the night sky, and Orion would come up rising over the trees, and sometimes you'd have the northern lights out there, and it was like just really a beautiful thing. And so I just kind of commemorated that, with that song. But really, I mean, just like whenever I think of Orion Ascending, I think of standing out there in my underwear getting the newspaper with Orion coming up over the trees at night, and it's like 10 degrees below zero, and just that. So I didn't have the heart to tell the lady that the Orion Ascending was about me standing out there in my drawers in the Arctic air watching Orion. It was a pretty secluded place, not in the suburbs, definitely. And so I didn't want to pop her bubble, but she had interpreted that music to have meaning for her in a certain way, and whatever her belief and her faith system was. Now she would have probably thought, that it was odd that I would have that song would be so different about a meaning to the person that wrote it and communicated it to her. But things have a way of being that way when you, for example. When when New Age music was like the big thing there in the late 80s and 90s, that came about because they just needed to pigeonhole music and have a marketing strategy for selling it, and that became the moniker or the label they put on it, that was New Age music. But there was some stuff associated with New Age music that didn't really have anything to do with the music. You think of artists like, Michael Hedges, who like was the Jimi Hendrix of acoustic guitar, reinvented the guitar right in front of your eyes, or guys like, oh, Alex DeGrassi, who was just a phenomenal fingerstyle guitarist who had influences of jazz and who knows what else. A very original guitar player, or a folky guy like Will Ackerman. Some of my influences included people like John Fahey and Leo Kottke and Ralph Towner. None of those guys had anything new age at all about their music, but anything during that period that was acoustic guitar instrumental got stuck in the new age category. And so it was kind of a strange thing, but there was this stuff that kind of was hanging on to the, associated with the new age, hot tubs and BMWs and crystals and triangles and chanting and all kinds of different things. Have your incense going and none of that had any meaning to me, and I would think that a potential audience might have been distressed. I mean, if they knew my religious beliefs, I'm a Latter-day Saint, what people used to call a Mormon, and so they'd probably think, a New Age Mormon. They would try to figure that it would cause some kind of cognitive dissonance with them. So I just kept my religious views to myself and just let them interpret the music whatever was meaningful to them. It was fine. I'm not preaching Mormonism with my music or anything. It's just music. It's just sound. It feels good. It makes you enjoy listening. It speaks to you as an individual. That falls upon your ears and affects your nervous system in a certain way. It may be relaxing. It may be enervating. It may be any number of different types of reactions you could get from it. The other thing is like with politics. And I was in the Air Force for many years, and I've worked in intelligence and had top secret clearance. And so, like for things like for certain lifestyle things associated with playing rock and roll music, the sex, drugs, rock and roll, well, that doesn't fit with that lifestyle. And I remember being concerned sometimes that I would be, some of the band friends that I've played with, they were guys that would use various substances in order to get into a particular state of mind for playing music. And I'd go out there, be stone cold sober, don't even drink or don't drink coffee or tea or, no alcohol. And of course, don't use any kind of drugs. And I just was just there for the music. And I was friends with these guys, and we're all good friends and playing music and having a great time. And we had this band that the six of us had kind of this musical ESP. Between all of us, we had almost 120 years collective music experience. But we had difference of lifestyle, and the music bridged that. But it was disturbing to some people if I was the only sober person around. Especially like if in a club, I'd always go to the bartenders and tell the bartenders if we played in a club, say, hey, if somebody buys around a drink for the band, can you make mine just a plain Coke or a plain ginger ale? And because I don't drink alcohol, and if somebody wants to, I don't want to dissuade anybody from buying around for the band, the bar making money. So could you just see that I would just get something that's non-alcoholic? And they always worked with me on that. It was never a problem. There was an occasion, though, we played a big festival in Alaska. Back in the day, it was the Talkeetna Bluegrass Festival. But it was like the Bluegrass Festival during the day, and then at night, things turned kind of wild. And I used to jokingly call it the Talkeetna Grass Festival. It was very much like a Grateful Dead type environment, if you get my meaning. And so we're playing a set there. We were the headline band for it, and the other guitarist in the band goes up and starts leading the audience in a chant, legalize pot, legalize pot. And I was mortified. I'm going to go, great. If the Air Force Office of Special Investigation gets word of this, there goes my security clearance. This is long before anything. States started legalizing cannabis, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And so the next rehearsal we had together, I brought that up as kind of a band meeting. I said, like, guys, my religious views, dissuade me from using, and I said, if you guys want to, that's fine. I'm tolerant, and you're tolerant of me and my beliefs and things. But when you're speaking for the band in a public place like that, you're speaking for all of us, and I can't get behind that. And so I told him, I said, like, well, if he goes to the microphone again and says, leads a chant, legalize pot, says, I'm going to go to the mic right after him and I'm going to recite the 13 Mormon Articles of Faith. And they all looked at me like I'd peed in the punch. It was like, you would do that, would you? And I said, try me. And so they were like, well, okay, then we'll just refrain from doing that again. And it was fine. We played music and we continued to play music for years together. And it was we got along fine. But sometimes there's conflicts between what the expectations of the music, the audience, your fellow musicians, and the public, what the expectations are between you and what you actually believe, or what your values are. And so you have to just realize that as a musician, sometimes you just got to let some things go, and learn to just be tolerant. And also, your audience has to learn to be tolerant too. I mean, I'm a huge fan of guys like Neil Young and Bruce Springsteen, but I totally disagree with their politics. I'm very conservative. I'm a family man, raised 5 children and got 14 grandchildren. Military person, served in the military, and I just and just that's just my particular views. I'm strong on a lot of different things, and of course people will disagree with you politically, but it's like, well, if they knew your politics, they'd boycott your music or something. And it's the idea to be successful as a musician. Well, you had to sell your soul in some way to give up those values, and you see this happen all the time. You see bands and stuff where they basically give up their personal sovereignty in order to get fame and fortune. I read once that Rod Stewart, the famous singer there, that he had a writer in his contract that basically said, there's a line in there that said that he would never be photographed with a drink in his hand that wasn't an alcoholic beverage. If they had a picture of him drinking a glass of milk, well, that would have violated his contract. So it's, why do they have to put that kind of stuff in there? I don't know. So I mean, the bands and stuff that I always enjoyed, like Genesis, those guys were pretty straight-laced guys. They came out of that Charterhouse school, and they were kind of square, except for maybe Peter Gabriel. He might have been a little out there. But the bands like Clapton, and there's a lot of the players I really admire that basically became addicts and got hooked on heroin or something like that. Clapton did. I mean, Hendrix did. I think Pat Metheny even got hooked once upon a time. I think I read that, and it's just it's a lifestyle thing that kind of goes with the music, and you got to avoid that if you want to stay healthy. I'm 64 years old. I'm still doing judo, and training judo. That's something that's important to me. So I got to stay healthy. Got to stay fit for that. So there's choices you have to make between music and your lifestyle. And because of those choices, I didn't become a full-time musician. I would have liked to, I think. I still would have loved to tour and play with bands and go all over the place, but I just, that life was just not for me. That my values and things kept me close to home, and I had to make choices along that way, and there were opportunities I had to pass up, and there were things that just didn't work out, and just probably, wisely so that they didn't. Because it might have had a negative effect on me or my family or other people around me. So I just kind of throw that out there as something to think about. If you faced like a moral or religious or political kind of identity crisis, connected to your music, how have you dealt with it? How do your values and your music connect, and how does it affect your lifestyle? And so just appreciate your ideas. Drop a comment in there. If this is an interesting discussion to you, please like and subscribe and share it with somebody, and let's have a discussion. I hope this won't be too controversial and turn people off and say, okay, we're going to hate you and going to unsubscribe from you and ban you. I hope that's not the case. It's not like this is a channel with millions of people. But just throw that out there for your consideration and your comment and your views. We'll see you next time here on the channel, and we'll see what you think. Bye, everybody.